let me just repeat the last 5 minutes. Okay. So last time in the last session, we discussed the Battle of Badr. And in the Battle of Badr, we discussed how the Muslims were victorious and they were able to take 70 prisoners, and they also killed 70 of the Qurayshis, right? So it was a resounding victory for the Muslims. And then after the Battle of Badr, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided to stay at the Badr plain for about 3 days. Right? And why did he do so? Because he wanted to demonstrate to all the Arabs that the Muslims were the clear victors, right? And the Quraysh had fled and they're not coming back. So this was a show of strength for the Muslims, for all the Arabs to see that the Muslims have won against the Quraysh. Okay. And then the second reason was that the Muslims wanted to bury the dead. So they wanted to bury the Qurayshis who had been killed during the battle, the pagan Meccans who had been killed, and they also wanted to bury the martyrs of Islam, right, who fought and were martyred during the Battle of Badr. Okay, so they stayed there and they buried them, and they buried them according to the Sharia of the. They buried the martyrs according to the Sharia of the martyrs, which is that you do not wash the wounds, and you bury them in the clothes that they are fighting in. Okay, so therefore, another reason was that they wanted to rest and recuperate before they go back to Medina. So in the previous session, we have already covered that Badr was about a few miles away, few hundred miles away from Medina, and therefore they did not want to go straight. So after a battle, straight to Medina. So after the battle, they wanted to rest and recuperate and then go to Medina. Okay. So therefore, Muhammad Sallallahu and the Muslims stayed at Badr for 3 days, and then during the stay, because the people of Makkah, when they were fleeing, when they were running back, they have left a lot of things there, such as armor, such as the swords, right? And the people of Makkah who were dead as well, they had the armors and swords as well on them, right? So they were very precious to the Arabs, because the Arabs did not usually were not very good at making armor, so they used to import these armors from different areas such as Rome, such as Persia, right? So armors were very important for them, right? So therefore, the Muslims were divided into 3 camps. So the first camp was the one that was collecting the armor, right? And the second camp was the camp that was chasing the Quraysh so that they don't come back, right? And the third camp was the camp that was protecting Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? So now discussion. Then they started discussing, right, which of the camp deserves more war booty, right? Which one would take the most spoils of war, right? So they began discussing amongst themselves, and then Allah revealed Surah Anfal, right, which is the 8th chapter of the Quran. And in the first verse, it says that the distribution is decided by Allah and His Messenger, right? So be mindful of Allah, settle your affairs, and obey Allah and His Messenger if you are believers. Okay. So then Allah says that He is going to be the one who's going to decide how the war booty is going to be distributed amongst the people. Okay. So as we know that the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was the final Ummah, is the final Ummah, and it is allowed to take the spoils of war. And the Ummah before the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, of other prophets, they were not allowed to take spoils of war, right? So Allah gave a special permission to this Ummah to take the spoils of war, right? And then the distribution was that 1/5, as Allah mentions in Surah Anfal as well, that 1/5 is for Allah and the Messenger, His close relatives, orphans, the poor, and needy travelers, right? So 1/5. So if let's say the booty is 100%, right? So 1/5 is set aside, so about 20%, right? And then 1/5 of the 1/5 is for Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? Which is about 4%, right? And then 4% is for the Ahlul Bayt, the close relatives of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? And then the 4% is for orphans, the 4% is for poor, and then 4% is for travelers, and the remaining 80% is distributed amongst the warriors who participated in the battle. Okay. So in the Battle of Badr, each one of them was given an equal share, and later we will see in the later battles, then the equal share will be equal share. Then the equal share will no longer be applicable, and then the person with a horse or with an animal is going to be given more war booty than someone without an animal. Okay. So, but in the Battle of Badr, everyone who participated in the Battle of Badr was given equal war booty. Okay. And then another aspect of the Battle of Badr was that the Muslims had 70 prisoners of war. Okay. And then the Muslims started discussing among themselves what they are going to do with these prisoners of war. Okay. So now, again, there were 2 camps that emerged, 2 opinions. So one was the opinion of Abu Bakr, right? So Abu Bakr said that we should free them. We should take some ransom and we should free them. Okay. And then Umar radiallahu ta'ala an belonged to the other camp, and he said that we should basically get rid of them, we should slay them because they were the ones who were trying to kill us, so we should kill them as well. Okay, so now Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam agreed with Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an, right? And then he instructed the captors, the one who had taken the captives, they instructed them to take care of the captured Qurayshis, right? And to feed them well and to treat them kindly. And that is what the Muslims did. They fed them very well. They fed them even better than they were feeding themselves, right? And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam personally took charge of caring for the prisoners who were the noblemen of the Quraysh. Okay, and then they were ransomed off according to their wealth, right? So if they were wealthy, if they can pay more money, then they were taken more money, right? Then more money was taken in order to feed them. Okay, and if they were poor, they could not give more money, right? So sometimes if they were very poor, they were set free without any charge. And if they were not that poor, if they were middle class, let's say, then they were set free for a low amount. Okay, so therefore Muhammad went with the opinion of Abu Bakr in taking ransom and then freeing the prisoners, right? Which were the Qurayshis, which were the relatives of Muhammad, Abu Bakr, Umar, right? So these were the relatives of the Muhajirun who had migrated from Makkah. Okay, so now after this particular episode, then Allah revealed in the same Surah Anfal, and He did not like this particular decision that was taken, right? So then Allah revealed the verse 67. He said that it is not fit for a prophet that he should take captives until he has thoroughly subdued the land. Okay, so then Allah basically agreed with the opinion of Umar and said that you should not have taken them captives, you should have slayed them. Okay, because why? Because as we will know later, I mean, there can be many the hikmah which we'll never know, many wisdoms which we'll never know, but we will know later that these same people who were ransomed off, they will come back during the Battle of Uhud and they will fight against the Muslims in many different battles, right? So therefore, one of the wisdoms can be this, and there can be other wisdoms that we don't know. But basically, what we do know is that Allah agreed with the opinion of Umar and He wanted the Prophet ﷺ to slay them all, but then they have already taken the decision to ransom them. So therefore, they could not go back and onto that decision, onto that promise. Okay. So then Allah, then in the further verse, in another verse, He said that had it not been for a prior decree, in the next verse, basically, had it not been for a prior decree from Allah, I would have certainly been you would have certainly been disciplined with a tremendous punishment for whatever ransom you have taken. Okay, so therefore Allah is basically not happy with the decisions that the Muslims took at that time, which was ransoming these prisoners off. Okay, and as we know, there's the famous story that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is in Musnad Ahmad, the book of Hadith as well, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he basically took instead of those people from the Quraysh who could learn, who could read and write, so he told them to teach the Muslims how to read and write, and then that was the ransom. Okay, and this is then after this particular issue was resolved, the issue of prisoners of war was resolved, right? Then during that time, after the Battle of Badr, so when the news was spreading in Medina regarding the victory for the Muslims, right? So at that time, the death of Ruqayya also took place, right? Who was the daughter of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she was married to Usman radhiyallahu anhu. Okay, and Usman radhiyallahu anhu, as we know, he did not participate physically in the Battle of Badr because he was instructed by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to take care of the daughter of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ruqayya. Okay, so she was seriously ill, and Usman radhiyallahu anhu stayed back at Medina, and he took care of Ruqayya, right? But then she basically died immediately after the Battle of Badr. Okay, and then another phenomena that arose after the Battle of Badr was the rise of the nifaq, or the birth of the nifaq, right? Birth and rise of the nifaq. So nifaq is, as we all know, if we read the Quran and we read the word munafiqun, so these munafiqun are the hypocrites, and nifaq is hypocrisy. Okay, so now after the Battle of Badr, so as we discussed in the previous session as well, that there were some amongst the people of Medina who were pagans. Okay, and those pagans, then they had to convert to Islam because Islam was very strong at that time, right? So they converted to Islam, right? But then still there were some who converted to Islam at the face of it, at the face of it, but they were not convinced in their hearts, right? So they did not like Islam in their hearts. They were not convinced of it. But on the face of it, they said that they are Muslims, right? So these are the munafiqun, right? And the chief of the munafiqun, the one who led them, was Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. Okay, and he is going to be the one who's going to cause a lot of problems later in the Seerah as well. Okay, and after this particular phenomena arose, right? So after the birth of this particular phenomena, there was another very important incident that happened at the Battle of Badr, right? The Muslims got to know about this news about 2 weeks after the Battle of Badr, which was the Roman victory, right? So as we know that in Surah Rum, so it states that Alif Lam Mim Rum, right? So the Romans have been defeated, and then Surah Rum goes on and says that the Romans are going to defeat the Persians in about 3 to 9 years. So if we look at the historical sources, we get to know that the Persians had the Persian king who was Khusro II at that time, Khusro Parvez, right? So he was the one who inflicted a crushing defeat on the Romans, right? So the Roman provinces such as Egypt and such as Syria, they went into Persian hands, right? So these were very important Roman provinces, and Egypt was the province of Rome, which was the most, which gave the most revenue. Okay, and Syria, as we all know, by Syria I do not mean the modern day Syria. By Syria, I'm sorry. By Syria, I mean the whole Levant region, right? So the whole Levant region and Egypt, it went to the Persian Empire, right? So it had not been a part of Persian Empire at that time, but it went to Persian Empire. Okay, and the Khusro II inflicted a heavy defeat on the Romans during the about 5 to 6 years, no, about 9 years, about 8.5 years before the Battle of Badr. And the Makkans who were there at that time, and Muslims were in Makkah at that time because they had not migrated yet. So the pagans at that time were rejoicing, right? So because the Romans were Christians and they were closer to the Muslims, right? And the Persians were closer to the pagans. So the pagans said that the so-called monotheists, the Christians, they have been defeated by the people who are not monotheists, the Majus, right? The Persians, right? So they were rejoicing. So then Allah revealed this verse that let them rejoice. Persia is going to be defeated by Rome in 3 to 9 years, right? Which was unbelievable at that time because the defeat was so bad for the Romans, right? So the defeat was so disastrous that it was impossible for anyone to predict that the Romans are going to come back, right? But then miraculously under Heraclius, who was the king of Rome, king of Roman Empire at that time, he beat Khusro in a battle which took place during the time of Battle of Badr at the same spot, not at the same spot, at the same time. And then in that battle, Heraclius defeated Khusro, and then he was able to retake all of these provinces which were part of the Roman Empire, right? Egypt and Syria. Okay, so therefore the prediction of the Quran came true. Okay, now after the Battle of Badr and before the Battle of Uhud, there were several incidences that took place, which I'm going to mention. So the first one is the Sariyah of Sawiq, right? So as I already mentioned in the previous session, that Sariyah, the difference between Sariyah and Ghazwa is that Sariyah is the expedition in which Muhammad Sallallahu did not take part, right? Whereas Ghazwa is the one in which Muhammad Sallallahu himself took part. Okay, so now this Sariyah of Sawiq was when Abu Sufyan he heard that Quraysh has been defeated in the Battle of Badr, right? So he said that I'm going to take vengeance, I'm going to take revenge against the Muslims, right? And then he went with about 200 Quraysh, and then he was hosted by Banu Nadheer, right, in the outskirts of Medina. He went inside a bit. He was still in the outskirts of Medina, but he burned some trees and he killed two Ansar, right? And then when the Muslims got to know that Abu Sufyan is there in the outskirts of Medina, they went and they chased him, right? And then because the army of Abu Sufyan and the army of Quraysh, they had Sawiq. So as you can see on the right hand side, I have this is Sawiq, right? So this is a particular delicacy, not a delicacy, but this was a dish that the Arabs used to eat, right? So it can be preserved for a long time. So they used to take it with them during war, right? So it's like mixed with wheat, roasted wheat and barley and honey, right? So the recipe is still the recipe, you can still find it and you can still make it, right? So this particular food item they used to take with themselves to war so that they can feed themselves during war, right? So when the Quraysh under the leadership of Abu Sufyan, when they were fleeing, right? So their camels were heavy. So what they did was that they threw the sabiq, right? And they threw the sabiq so that the camels would become light and they could flee faster, right? So that is why this particular Sariyah is called the Sariyah of Sabiq. Okay. And then afterwards, after this, another important incident that happened was the attempted assassination of Muhammad by Safwan and Umer bin Wahab, right? So the Safwan bin Umayyah, as we already discussed in the previous session, that during the Battle of Badr, Umayyah bin Khalaf was the chieftain of Makkah, one of the chieftains of Makkah, and he was also the owner of Bilal radiallahu anh when Bilal radiallahu anh was being persecuted, right? And then later Bilal radiallahu anh was freed, but then he was the one who used to persecute Bilal radiallahu anh, right? And in the previous session, I also mentioned that Bilal radiallahu anh was the one who put an end to Umayyah bin Khalaf. And the son of Umayyah bin Khalaf was called Safwan bin Umayyah. He would later accept Islam, but at that time he was burning with vengeance, right? Because his own father has been killed by the Muslims, and Umer bin Wahab as well, his own son. So these two were cousins, right? Umer bin Wahab and Safwan bin Umayyah. So his own son was with the Muslims as a prisoner of war. Okay. So then Safwan bin Umayyah, he and Umer bin Wahab, both of them, they were talking, and then Umer bin Wahab said that they began talking about the Battle of Badr and the events. And then Safwan bin Umayyah said that he's going to give a lot of money to Umer bin Wahab if he could assassinate Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So then Umer bin Wahab, who was not a very rich person, Safwan bin Umayyah was a rich person, right? So he said that, okay, I'm going to do that. So he went straight back home, and then he took a dagger, he placed it on his neck, a poison dagger, and then he raced all the way to Medina. Okay. And then when he came to Medina, then he was brought to Muhammad sallallahu by Umar radiallahu anh. Umar radiallahu anh was very vigilant because he knew that he had some ill intentions, right? So he had this intuition that Umair bin Wahab has ill intentions, right? So he was very close to him with his sword out. So then Umair bin Wahab came to Muhammad sallallahu, and then Muhammad sallallahu asked him what he has come to Medina for. Then Umair bin Wahab said that he has come to Medina in order to pay ransom for his son, right, who was under custody of the Muslims. So then Muhammad said to Umair bin Wahab, then what is this dagger doing in your on your neck, right? Then Umair bin Wahab said, this dagger is just nothing. What did it do during the Battle of Badr, right? So then Muhammad basically repeated the entire story that happened between Umair bin Wahab and Safwan bin Umayyah. He said that you and Safwan were talking, and then you planned to assassinate me, and then you went back home, and then you came back and you've come here to assassinate me. Okay. And then Umair bin Wahab, he had not told this to anyone. Nobody knew it except Safwan bin Umayyah, right? And there was no way that anyone could have told Muhammad about this except, of course, Allah himself, right? So Umair bin Wahab at that time immediately recognized that Muhammad is a true prophet. Of course, previously as well, they knew that Muhammad was a true prophet, but this was a watershed moment for him. And then he accepted Islam and he became a Sahabi. Okay. And then he went back to Makkah, and he also converted a lot of people to Islam back to Makkah as well. Okay. So this assassination attempt on Muhammad failed, and instead of the one who decided to execute Muhammad decided to carry out this plan, Umair bin Wahab, he ended up converting to Islam. Okay. And another very important incident that took place between the Battle of Badr and the Battle of Uhud was the expulsion of Banu Qaynuqa. So now the three Jewish tribes, as in the previous session also I mentioned that there was some tension that was brewing between the Jewish tribes and the Muslims. Okay. So initially the Muslims and the Jews, they were at very good terms, but then there were few incidents that happened, right, in which the Muslims and the Jews, they were not getting along. Okay, because the Jews, they kept on breaking the treaty which the Muslims and the Jews had at the start of the Madani phase. Okay, so now with regards to Banu Qaynuqa, so after the Battle of Badr, So Banu Qaynuqa, after the Battle of Badr, when they heard about it, that the Quraysh has been defeated, so they were very sad. And then they also mocked the Muslims and they said that you met Quraysh in the battlefield, but you did not meet us. Okay. So had you met real men from Banu Qaynuqa, you would not have won. Okay. So they started mocking the Muslims and they were not happy at they were very sad actually at the defeat of Quraysh at the Battle of Badr. Okay. So now the then therefore the tensions between Banu Qaynuqa and the Muslims started. So now what happened was that there was an incident in the souk, in the market of Banu Qaynuqa. So Banu Qaynuqa, the Jewish tribes, they owned a marketplace and therefore they were very good businessmen. So therefore they were rich. So in that particular marketplace, there was a Muslim woman and then they did some vulgar acts on that Muslim woman. And therefore a Muslim man, he came and then he started fighting with one of them and he killed one of them, right? We killed one of Banu Qaynuqa. And then the men of Banu Qaynuqa surrounded that Muslim man and they killed the Muslim man. Okay. So now after this news reached Muhammad and he verified that this is what happened, and then Banu Qaynuqa were the ones who broke the treaty. They killed a Muslim. They basically did a vulgar act on the Muslim woman, and then they killed a Muslim man. So therefore, he sent them a message that the treaty is no longer valid and they've broken it, and therefore they have they have to leave Medina. Okay. So now after the Banu Qaynuqa they hear about it, right? Then what they do is that they lock themselves up in their own fortresses. And then Muhammad when he hears about this, then he goes there and he besieges them, right? He lays a siege outside the fortresses for about 2 weeks, and then he cuts off the supplies, right? So if the supplies are cut off, the food and water cannot go in, cannot go out, right? So therefore people cannot go out, food and water cannot go in, right? So therefore the Banu Qaynuqa, they ran out of food and water and they surrendered. Okay, and then Muhammad after the surrender terms were that the Muslims are going to leave them for 3 days, and in that 3 days they can collect their wealth, they can collect their belongings, and they can leave Medina. Okay, and this is what happened, that Banu Qaynuqa, they were given 3 days by the Muslims, and they took their wealth, they took their belongings, whatever they could, and they left Medina and they were expelled out of Medina. Okay, and in this particular incident, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, who was the leader of the Munafiqun, right, he was the one who was very forceful to Muhammad, right, to be generous to Banu Qaynuqa, right? But then Muhammad decided that this is going to be the punishment for Banu Qaynuqa, that they have to leave Medina. Okay, so Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, as we will see throughout the Seerah, that he's showing his colors during every major incident that is taking place during the Seerah. Okay, and finally the Saria, the expedition which led to the Battle of Uhud, was called the Saria of Al-Qarada. And in this Saria, so as we discussed in the previous sessions when we were covering the Makkah, when we were covering the Meccan era, we said that the Quraysh, their lifeline, their economic lifeline was Rilat al-Shita'i was-Sayf, right? So they would go to Yemen and they would come back and they would sell the goods from Yemen to the tribes all over Arabia, which would come to Makkah during the Hajj season. And then they would go to Syria and they would come back and they would sell the stock from Syria to the people, to the Arab tribes. And that is how they grew rich, they grew in prestige, and they also were economically able to sustain themselves. Okay, so now when the Muslims are in Medina, they began attacking the caravans of the Quraysh, right? And this is what led to the Battle of Badr, as we discussed in the last session. Now, after that, the chieftains of the Quraysh, they began discussing amongst themselves that since they could not take the direct route to Syria, to the Roman province of Syria, so they should take an alternate route, right? So that the Muslim will not ambush them. So now they decided to take a route which is going to go towards the northeast, all the way from Makkah to Iraq, and then from Iraq to Syria, right? So they decided to take that route. Now Muhammad had Muslims inside Makkah as well who would inform Muhammad about what is going on in Makkah, right? One such Muslim was Salih ibn al-Nu'man, right? And he was the one who was listening to the conversation Or in one particular narration, it is said that one of the chieftains of the Quraysh, when he was drunk, he told to Salid that this is what we are going to do. We are going to go all the way to Iraq, and then from Iraq we are going to go to Syria, and that is how we are going to avoid the Muslims. We are going to dodge them. Okay, and then Salid told Muhammad Sallam that this is what Quraysh are planning to do, and this is what they will do when they'll go to Syria. And then Muhammad Sallam asked Zaid bin Harith to leave Zaid bin Harith, who was his adopted son. He asked him to take an expedition to Al-Qarada, right, to take an expedition and then intercept the caravan of the Quraysh, right, and then take the war booty. Okay, because the Muslims and the Quraysh, they were involved, they were at war with each other, so therefore the Muslims were allowed to intercept the caravan of the Quraysh and to take the war booty. Okay, now that this is what Zaid bin Harith did, he went to Al-Qarada and he intercepted the caravan, right, and he took a lot of camels and about 100,000 dirhams, right, so a lot of money. So leather, a lot of other things that were there inside in the caravan that were going to first to the border of Iraq and then all the way to Syria, right, which was Qurayshi investment, right, so the Muslims took it, right, and then Zaid bin Harith returned back to Medina with this successful expedition, this Seerah of Al-Qarada. Okay, now the Quraysh, who were already planning vengeance on Muhammad and also on the Muslims because of the crushing defeat that was inflicted during the Battle of Badr, right? Now, after this particular Seerah, the urgency of another war was the urgency of another war. Basically, the Quraysh realized that they have to fight the Muslims urgently, right? Because after the Seerah, their economic lifeline was also stifled. So therefore, they decided to fight another war with the Muslims, and that war came to be known as the Battle of Uhud. Okay. So now the Quraysh, after the Seerah of Al-Qarada, the Quraysh were furious, and they decided to fight a war, and they decided to attack Medina, and they decided to finish the Muslims once and for all. Okay. So, sorry. So they decided to finish the Muslims once and for all. Okay. So in about Shawwal of the third year of Hijrah, which is about 1 year and a few weeks after the Battle of Badr. Right? So 1 year and about 3 weeks after the Battle of Badr. So they decided to go from Makkah to Medina with about 3,000 men, about 200 horses, and 700 armors. Right? So a huge army. According to Arab standards, right? So Arabs were not used to having these huge armies, right? And then huge army and a lot of horses and a lot of armors, right? So they were very well prepared, and they were adamant in finishing the Muslims once and for all. Okay, so they set off to Medina. Now, the uncle of Muhammad Sallam, who was Abbas, right? So his servant, then Abbas, he sent his servant to Muhammad Sallam to tell them about the planning of Quraysh. Okay, and then Muhammad Sallam, the servant of Abbas arrived about. So the Meccans have already decided to go, and they're now marching towards Medina. Okay, along with the horses and the armors. Right. So Abbas, the servant of Abbas, then came to Muhammad Sallam about 3 or 4 days before the Meccans are supposed to arrive. Right, and he tells Muhammad Sallam that the Quraysh have already set off from Makkah, and they're arriving in Medina. They'll be arriving in a few days, and therefore you should start preparing for war. Okay, and then Muhammad Sallam, when he hears about it, right, he sends spies to confirm about the Quraysh arrival, and then when he gets the confirmation of the Quraysh arrival, the impending Quraysh arrival, then Muhammad Sallam calls a shura. Right, so the first shura that he calls is with the elders of the Ansar. Right, and after that he calls a general shura in which he consults with the people of Medina regarding what do they have to do in order to protect Medina. Okay, and then Muhammad Sallam firstly gives his own opinion, and he says that his opinion is that we should stay in Medina, right, and then we should let them come, and they will not be able to come to Medina, and they will not be able to attack successfully Medina, because Medina, as we all know, that the geography of Medina is the geography of Medina is such that it is surrounded by 3 areas, that it is protected by 3 sides, and then it is a little bit open from one side, but it's difficult to come to Medina, right? So it is a very well protected city naturally. So in the west and in the east, we have got the Harra, which are the volcanic rocks. So in the volcanic rocks, as you know, that the sand is such that the horses cannot go from there. So it will not be possible for the Quraysh to come from there. Whereas towards the north, we have got the mountain of Uhud, and towards the south, towards the Quba area, you have got the date trees, right? So it is very difficult for an entire army of 3,000 men to come through the date trees, okay, through a farm of date trees. So Muhammad Sallam decided that we are going to stay inside Medina, and then we are going to defend Medina by staying inside Medina. Okay, and then there were some young Sahaba who were very eager to fight, and then they said that we should not be staying inside the Medina, we should be going out, we should be marching and meeting the Quraysh in an open battle. Okay, and then the older Sahaba, they stayed silent. So Muhammad Sallam then thought that this is the decision of the Shura, that we have to go out and fight. So this is what he said, concluded the Shura. Then he said that the majority says that we have to go out and fight, and this is what we are going to do. And then he went and he put on the armor. Okay, and then when he was, then he went away and he was putting his armor and preparing for war. So the young Sahabi were then reprimanded by the older ones, and they said that if Muhammad Sallam has told you that we should stay in Medina, then you should agree with him. Why were you debating with him, right? So why did you decide to go out? Okay, Muhammad Sallam is more experienced than you, so his opinion was better than you, would definitely be better than you. So why did you guys decided to give an alternate opinion? Okay, so they reprimanded the young Sahabi. So the young Sahabi then sent Hamza, the uncle of Muhammad Sallam, and with the message that we are going to now stay in Medina, we have changed our mind, we are now going to stay in Medina, right? But then when Hamza went to Muhammad Sallam and Muhammad Sallam had already put on his armor, then Hamza told him about this. Then Muhammad Sallam said that it is not befitting a prophet, it is not allowed for a prophet that when he has put his armor, that he takes it off, right? So which means that now the prophet has already decided to go, and he has put his armor and he's going out there meeting the enemy on an open battle. Then he's not allowed to take off the armor and then to resort to a different tactic. Okay, so therefore the initial decision of the Shura, which was to go out and meet Quraysh in an open battle, right? Which was it was the one that Muhammad Sallam decided upon. Okay, and then Muslims then set out with about 1,000 men, right, and a few horses and 100 armors to the Mount of Uhud, right? So as I just mentioned, that Uhud is towards the north and Makkah is towards the south. Okay, so the Makkans are coming from the south, and Muhammad Sallam went to Uhud towards the north, right? So now the question is, why did Muhammad Sallam did not go to the south? Okay, so if anyone can answer why Muhammad Sallam did not go to south, why did you go north all the way to Uhud? Any idea? So if we look at the terrain here, so the mountain of the mountain of Uhud is a mountain towards the north of Medina, and it is protected, right? So if the Muslims camp here, so as you can see where my mouse is pointing, so if the Muslims camp here, and therefore the Muslim camp is protected at the back by the Mount of Uhud, right? And here Muhammad Sallam placed 50 archers, right, which are going to play a decisive part in the battle. Later we will discuss about them, right? So now these archers are going to cover this particular area, okay, towards the left and towards the right, so that no one from the Quraysh can come from this area, right? Whereas the Muslim army can be concentrated here. So this was a genius plan by Muhammad Sallam, that he went to Uhud in order to maximize the numerical disadvantage. So in order to minimize the numerical disadvantage that the Muslims had, right? So now in the Battle of Uhud, you had very small place in which you are going to fight the battle. So a lot of men cannot fit in, right? So therefore, there are more chances of one-on-one combat compared to being outnumbered 1 to 3. Okay. So therefore, Muhammad Sallam camped in such a strategic manner. Okay. Now, another question is that if Muhammad Sallam left Medina and went to Uhud, then why did the Quraysh did not just come into Medina and just settle there and say this is ours? Why did they not do that? Any idea? Anyone knows, right? They could just come into Medina and say, this is ours now. What are you going to do, right? So, huh? Yeah. So this was against the Jahiliyyah tradition, right? So this would be against the how would you say? Yeah, the Arabs will make fun of them, right? So therefore, they wanted to be men and to fight against men, right? Where the men were camped, right? Where the men of the opposition were camped, right? So therefore, when they heard that the Muslims are camped at Uhud, so they went straight to the mountain of Uhud and they decided to fight the Muslims there. Okay. So as I've just mentioned that this is the strategic placement of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So the Muslims infantry was divided into the infantry is basically a person on foot, right? So person on foot who is fighting on foot is called infantry, and the person who is fighting on a horse is called cavalry. Okay. So the Muslim infantry was divided into three. So one was led by Hubab ibn Munzir, the other was led by Musab ibn Umer, and the third was led by Usayd ibn Hudayr, right? And there were archers which were placed in order to safeguard this particular area, right? So the Quraysh cannot circumvent and come from here, and the Quraysh will be forced to attack this small area, right? So this was a genius tactic that was devised by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay. And then the Quraysh, they had Ikrimah. Ikrimah was the son of Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl was killed during the Battle of Badr, so he was leading one infantry. And then Abu Sufyan, who was the chief of Makkah at that time, because the other chiefs, they were already killed during the Battle of Badr, so that leaves Abu Sufyan as the main chief. So Abu Sufyan was in the middle, and he was leading another infantry, so foot soldiers. And then Khalid ibn al-Walid was leading a cavalry, right? So horseback, so the warriors on horseback, so that they were led by Khalid ibn al-Walid. Okay. Now, what happened was that when the Muslims were marching towards the mountain of Uhud, then as the initial opinion of Muhammad was to stay at Medina, right? And Abdullah ibn Ubay, he agreed with Muhammad that we should stay in Medina. But then the Shura decided, as we discussed, that we should go out and fight. So therefore, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, he said that I am basically offended by you guys rejecting my opinion, right? So therefore, he took 300 men, and then he went back to Medina. Okay. So from 1,000 men, initial 1,000 men, the Muslim camp was reduced to 700 men who were fighting in this particular battle. Okay. So now 50 archers were placed here in this particular mountain. So with this particular mountain, today is called Jabal al-Ruma, which means the mountain of the archers. Previously, I think it was called Jabal al-Ainain, right? So it is now called Jabal al-Ruma. So these archers were placed strategically in order to avoid Quraysh from attacking from this side. Okay. So now after this arrangement between the Quraysh and the Muslims, now the battle starts, right? And at the start of the battle, then Abu Sufyan comes and he says to the Ansar, then he says that we are not fighting with you, we are fighting with the Muhajirun, right? So we are fighting with the ones who left us from and they came to your lands, right? So and then they inflicted a heavy defeat on us during the Battle of Badr. They are our cousins. We are fighting against them, not against you. Then Ansar, of course, refused. So this particular tactic of creating divisions amongst Muhajirun and Ansar, it was not successful, right? It failed badly. Now afterwards, the battle started, and as was the tradition, the battle started with a Mubaraza, which is that there was a one-on-one battle between the champion of the Muslims and the champion of the Quraysh, right? And there was this one particular battle that we know of that was between Talha ibn Abi Talha from the Quraysh side, and then Ali ibn Abi Talib from the Muslim side. Okay, and then Talha ibn Abi Talha was in armor from head to basically his thighs, right? So from head to his thighs, he was in an armor, so you could not kill him from head to his thighs, right? Whereas Ali did not have much armor, so he went there. He fought against Talha. Talha swung his sword. Ali dodged it, and then he chopped him from behind his thigh. So from beneath his thigh, not from behind, from beneath his thigh, right? So that chopped his leg, and then Ali spared Talha ibn Abi Talha, but then later during the battle, Talha ibn Abi Talha was killed because he did not have legs. So therefore, of course, it was very difficult to fight without legs. So Talha ibn Abi Talha was an easy target, and therefore he was killed. Okay. Now at the start of the battle, Muhammad Sallam, as always, he's motivating his Sahaba in order to participate in the battle and to fight courageously. So he takes out his sword and he says that who is going to take my sword? And then the Sahaba, they said that many of them said that we are going to do this, we are going to take it, and we are going to fight with your sword. And amongst the Sahaba, amongst the first was Zubair ibn Awam, right? So amongst the 10 who were promised Jannah, okay, amongst the Ashra Mubashira. So then Muhammad said again, who is going to take it and who is going to pay the haqq, right? Who's going to pay the haqq of this particular sword? Then everyone was silent because they did not knew what paying the haqq was, right? And then this particular Sahabi's name was Abu Dujana, okay? And this Sahabi was the one who said that I am the one who's going to do it, Muhammad, okay? And then Muhammad gave this sword to Abu Dujana. And Abu Dujana was a warrior, right? So he was an excellent warrior. And then Zubair bin Awam, he narrates that after the sword was given to Abu Dujana, right, something happened in his heart that he was a bit sad that why this sword is given to Abu Dujana. So he began following Abu Dujana during the Battle of Uhud. Right? Now the Mubaraza has happened. Now there's an open fight between the Muslims and the Quraysh, right? So now they're fighting against each other. The Muslims have charged and they're fighting against each other. Now Zubair is following Abu Dujana, and Abu Dujana, as he's seeing, Abu Dujana is fighting ferociously, right? And then Zubair, he acknowledges implicitly that Abu Dujana was the one who deserved this particular sword, okay? Because he inflicted a lot of damage on Quraysh. And then another incident that we know from the Battle of Uhud is the martyrdom of Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala, right? And we know that Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala was a wrestler, very strong, right? And when he converted to Islam, when he and Umer radhiyallahu ta'ala, when they converted to Islam, the Muslims were able to pray openly for the first time, okay? And he participated in the Battle of Badr, right? And where in the Battle of Badr, he killed Tu'ama ibn Adi, right? Tu'ama ibn Adi was the brother of Mutaim ibn Adi, okay? And Mutaim ibn Adi, we have already mentioned that Mutaim ibn Adi was the one who gave protection to Muhammad after it was taken away by Abu Lahab, okay? So Mutaim ibn Adi's son was Jubair ibn Mutaim, and Jubair ibn Mutaim's slave was Wahshi, okay? So now Jubair ibn Mutaim's uncle was Tu'ama ibn Adi, and Tu'ama ibn Adi was killed by Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala during the Battle of Badr, okay? So now Jubair ibn Mutaim wanted to avenge the killing of his uncle by killing Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala, right? So he gave this task to his slave by the name of Wahshi, Abyssinian slave, and he said that if you are going to kill Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala, I am going to free you, okay? So now Wahshi was an expert spear thrower. He was very expert at throwing spears. So what he did was he hid behind, and then when he saw the opportunity, then he threw the spear, and then it thrust in between. So from the back of Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala. So Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala, as always, is fighting ferociously. He's killing a lot of the Quraysh, especially the ones who are carrying the flag. Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala is killing them. Now Wahshi is scouting Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala, and when he finds the opportunity, he throws the spear, and then it goes through the back and comes from the front, okay? So then because of the wound that is sustained, it was a mortal wound, and Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala was martyred because of this wound, okay? Immediately, of course, if the spear is going to thrust from the back and come from the front, so there's not a lot of time left, right? So Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala was immediately martyred during that time, right? So Wahshi then later became Muslim, so we are going to discuss this story later as well. So he became Muslim, and then he also killed Musaylama Kadhab. Right? So Musaylama Kadhab was one of the false prophets. So when the Muslims were fighting against the false prophets, Musaylama was the most dangerous one, and Wahshi was the one who killed him with the same spear that he martyred Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala with. Okay. So now after the charge by the Muslims are gaining upper hand, and the Quraysh, they realize that the Muslims are not going to be defeated, and they are the ones who are getting killed in large numbers. So they start fleeing. Okay, they started going back. They start fleeing, and they leave their swords, they leave their armor, so that they could flee fast, and they could return to safety. Okay, so now the Muslims, they see the armor, they see the swords, and the prisoners. The war booty, which is the spoils of war, has been made halal to the Muslims. So as we discussed in the Battle of Badr, the spoils of war were made halal to the Muslims, as in Surah Anfal. Okay. Now the Muslims, when they see the spoils of war, they start collecting the spoils of war, right? And they, of course, when you're collecting the spoils of war, when you're collecting armor, when you're collecting different things, right? So you are not going to be carrying a sword with you as well, right? So you had, it's just like armor is heavy, so you just throw your sword and you start collecting as much booty as you can. So that is what the Muslims did, right? So they let their guard down. Okay. Now, as the Quraysh are retreating, they are going away. They are retreating. The one who is the most astute amongst them, the great warrior, later he's going to become a Muslim, and they're later going to become one of the, if not the greatest general in history, right? So one of the greatest generals in history, his name was Khalid bin Walid. So he was the one who was retreating, but he was also scouting what is going on. Okay. So the genius mind that he was scouting the Muslims, what is going on. And then what happened was that when the Muslims were collecting the booty, so the archers that were placed in this particular site in order to prevent the attacks from coming, even in order to prevent the attack from this place, right? From this place or from this place, these archers were placed strategically. Okay. So now 50 of these archers, amongst these 50 archers, 40 of these archers, right, they also deserted, right? They said that why should we not be the ones who will be collecting the booty, right? So 10 of them remained steadfast, 40 of them deserted, and they started collecting the war booty. Okay. Then Khalid bin Walid saw his opportunity, and then there are two opinions, right, where what he did, right? So the opinion one, which is the popular opinion, is that he went all the way back from the mountain of Uhud, and then he came from here, right? So he circumvented the entire mountain of Uhud like this, and then he came from here, and then he attacked the Muslim camp from here, right? So which is according to Safiur Rahman Mubarak Puri. So this is very difficult to it is difficult to accept, because it is going to take a long time to come all the way from the mountain of Uhud, right? So the alternate opinion is that Khalid bin Walid just came from here, right? So he was here, he was withdrawing tactically, and then when he saw the opportunity, when he saw that the archers had been reduced to 10, then he hid himself in a ditch here somewhere, and then he immediately jumped on the 10 archers from this side, right? So therefore, this is what makes sense, that this is what caused a chaos in the Muslim camp. Okay. So now Khalid bin Walid's cavalry, it attacked the Muslims and then killed the 10 archers that were placed here, and then went straight here, right? Went straight towards the Muslim camp and started attacking the Muslims. Okay. Now Muhammad ﷺ, he saw Khalid bin Walid, and he started shouting to the Muslims to leave the war booty and to start and then to come back to rejoin the Muslim camp, right? So the Muslims are collecting war booty here. So the Muhammad ﷺ started shouting to them here, to stop collecting the war booty and to come back to the Muslim camp and to defend the Muslims from the cavalry attack by Khalid bin Walid, right? So about 200 people are with Khalid bin Walid, and they're on horseback, and they are attacking the Muslims here, who are not that many, right? And Muhammad ﷺ himself is here. Okay. So now Muhammad ﷺ is with 9 other companions, seven of them Ansar, and 2 of them Muhajirun, right? So 2 of them were Talha and Asad bin Abi Waqqas, right? So the 2 of the 10 promised Jannah. So they were the ones with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And then the cavalry of Khalid bin Walid, they started throwing arrows towards the Muslim camp, right? Started throwing many arrows, right? So that it kills all of them in the Muslim camp. And then what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the 9 companions, they did was they started retreating towards the mountain of Uhud, right, in order to protect themselves from the arrows. Then the 7 Ansar, they started going in different directions in order to deflect the Quraysh, right? So if they are going in different directions, the Quraysh are going to go in different directions as well, and they will be dispersed. So now these 7 Ansar are martyred, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is left with only Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas and Talha bin Ubaidillah, right? So, and then they took refuge in a particular cave. You can call it a hole inside the mountain, something like this, right? So this is proposed to be the hole in which Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Talha and Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, they took refuge, right? So this is something like this. They went inside in order to protect themselves from the arrows that were coming towards them. Okay, and then Talha radhiyallahu ta'ala, as we know, that he was seriously injured. He took a lot of arrows and his hand was paralyzed. He was seriously injured during this. And Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas was the one who was firing the arrows back towards the Quraysh, right, in order to protect Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the attacks. Okay. Now during that time, one of the arrow which was thrown by Utbah bin Abi Waqqas, who was the blood brother of Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, right? And he was fighting for the Quraysh against the Muslims. Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas is fighting for the Muslims, and he's the one who's protecting Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas is the blood brother of Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas. He's fighting with the Quraysh, and he's trying to kill Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So this is the division that took place between Kufur and Islam. during the initial stages of Islam, right, in the Arabian Peninsula. So now Utbah bin Abi Waqas, he shot an arrow. Now that arrow struck Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It went straight through the cheek, right? So it went through the cheek, right, and it dislodged the incisor tooth, right? So this tooth, it went straight through the cheek and dislodged this tooth of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so as you can see, as you can, I mean, probably imagine that, not see, probably imagine that this is going to be extremely painful. Okay, and then another blow, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam took another blow, which was that there was one Qurayshi warrior. He came and then he came with a sword on horseback, and he decided to swing it on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And then Talha, he took a shield out and he protected Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with it, but the force was so severe that the sword still went through and then struck Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the helmet, which he was wearing for protection, right? And then that helmet went inside the cheekbone. So this is your cheekbone. The helmet went inside the cheekbone from the sword blow, right? So the sword blow was so severe that the helmet broke and it went inside the cheekbone. So one wound in which the arrow went inside the cheek, and another wound in which the helmet, the metal helmet, it went inside the cheekbone. Okay? And the helmets that the Arabs had at that time were like chains, right? So they were chain helmets. So the chain went inside the cheekbone, right? They were not like the Roman helmets that we are used to seeing in the movies, right? So in the movies, you have got a metallic helmet, right? So the Arabs used to have primitive helmets in which they were like chains, metallic chains, right? So the chains probably this is what happened, that the chains broke and they went inside the cheekbone. Okay, so now Musab ibn Umair, who was one of the commanders. So in the previous slide, as I just mentioned, that the Musab ibn Umair was leading the infantry of the Muslims, one of the flanks of the infantry. So he was the one who was martyred as well during this chaos which happened. And after his martyrdom, so he was probably wearing a cloak which was gifted to him by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Quraysh thought that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been assassinated, right? So when the Musab ibn Umair was martyred, then the Quraysh began celebrating that they have killed Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and then therefore they started withdrawing. Okay, so when the rumor spread that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been killed by the Qurayshis during the Battle of Uhud, so they started withdrawing. Okay, and then the Muslims, they also became very sad because the rumor was spreading very fast, until Ka'b bin Malik, who was amongst the Muslims, one of the Muslims, he found Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he also got injured in the process. That while he was frantically, people were trying to find Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he found Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he got injured in the process, right? And then slowly and gradually, it was the news is spread, the correct news is spread that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is still alive, but he's seriously injured. That his face is seriously injured. Okay, and in the chaos that ensued after the archers, they started collecting war booty, and the Muslims, they started collecting war booty instead of being prepared for the Quraysh, right? And then warding off. So if you are going to compare this with Badr, so they stayed for 3 days in Badr, right? And one of the reasons was to show the Quraysh that they are the ones who are victorious, right? And if the Quraysh comes back anytime, they'll be ready, right? Whereas the Battle of Uhud is a stark contrast in the sense that they did not repeat the same precautions that they did during the Battle of Badr. Okay, and then they let their guards down, and this is what happened, right? And 70 Muslims were martyred during the Battle of Uhud, including Hamza, right, and including Musab ibn Umair and prominent Sahabi that were martyred during the Battle of Uhud. Okay. And another incident which I forgot to mention was that during the main battle, during Battle of Uhud, this particular person, Ubay bin Khalaf, he was a staunch enemy of Islam, and he used to insult Muhammad a lot, right? And he used to say that I'm going to kill you one day. Then Muhammad at one day, Muhammad said that no, it's going to be I who's going to kill you. Okay. And then when he was charging during the Battle of Uhud, fighting for the Quraysh against the Muslims, then Muhammad went himself, and then he basically pricked a spear. He pricked a spear. He did not fully insert it into him, but he pricked a spear onto him, and then Ubay bin Khalaf died from the little wound that he got from the pricking of the spear, right? But then, of course, Allah made it deadly for him, and he died because of that wound. Okay, so he is the only person who was killed at the hands of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and then finally, what happened was that after the Battle of Uhud, during the Battle of Uhud and after the Battle of Uhud, So in the previous slides, I've mentioned that Banu Nadheer were the ones, right? So they were the ones who hosted Abu Sufyan when he came to Medina, right? So they were the ones who hosted Abu Sufyan, which was against the treaty that they had with the Muslims. Okay, so they had already broken the treaty that they had with the Muslims. That is, they are not going to fight against the Muslims, and they're not going to support the pagans against the Muslims. Okay, now there was a chieftain of Banu Nadir. His name was Ka'b ibn Ashraf. Okay, and Ka'b ibn Ashraf was he secretly did a pact with Abu Sufyan, and the details of the pact are not mentioned. But then we can assume that he would be having a pact to attack the Muslims. Okay, and then he also started writing poetry, mocking the Muslim women, mocking the Muslims, mocking Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay, now after he did the pact, then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided to get rid of Ka'b bin Ashraf, right? So because Ka'b bin Ashraf was a threat to the Muslims, so therefore Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided to assassinate him. Yeah, I mean not himself, but Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided to get rid of Ka'b bin Ashraf. And then he asked the Sahabi who's going to be the one who's going to get rid of Ka'b bin Ashraf for him. And then this particular Sahabi, Muhammad ibn Maslama, he said that he is going to be the one who is going to do it. Okay. And then he was friends with Ka'b bin Ashraf. So he went there into the fortresses of Banu Nadir, and he called Ka'b bin Ashraf. And then he started talking about the days before Islam came, right? And he started talking to him how, of course, it was a bait. So he started talking to him how things were so good before Islam came, and now Muhammad Sallam is making us fight against everyone, right? So Ka'b bin Ashraf let his guard down. He became very happy, and both of them started talking about they started revering. I mean, they started praising the situation that they had before Islam, right? And they started saying that this Islam has came and this has not been good for us, right? So then Muhammad ibn Maslama said that he needs some money because Ka'b bin Ashraf was very wealthy. So Muhammad ibn Maslama said that he needs some money, right? And then he can only repay him with the weapons, right? So Ka'b bin Ashraf said, okay, why don't you give me your wife? So Muhammad ibn Maslama said that I cannot give you my wife. So Ka'b bin Ashraf said, okay, give me your children. So Muhammad ibn Maslama said, I cannot give you your children. Okay. So basically his children up until Muhammad ibn Maslama is able to repay his debt. Okay. So then Muhammad ibn Maslama said that how about I give you my weapons, right? So then you can take these weapons and you can have it with you because weapons are expensive and they're a priced commodity. So and then you can have it with you until I return you the money back. Okay. Then Ka'b bin Ashraf he agreed, and then the next day Muhammad ibn Maslama came with other Sahabi with the weapons. So it was a very clever tactic to bring the weapons inside the compounds of Banu Nadir, right? And he could say that I'm just giving it to Ka'b bin Ashraf. Okay. So a very clever tactic that was devised by Muhammad ibn Maslama. Okay. Then he came and then he called Ka'b bin Ashraf down and then come from his fortress, and he came down and he said, Muhammad ibn Maslama said that you are smelling very good. So let me smell it. So what kind of smell is this? So Ka'b bin Ashraf said, okay, yeah, you can smell. So when he started smelling, so then Muhammad ibn Maslama said that it is coming from your hair. Let me smell your hair, right? So when Ka'b bin Ashraf brought his head down, so Muhammad ibn Maslama took him in a lock, and the other Sahabi executed Ka'b bin Ashraf. Okay. So one of the chieftains of Banu Nadir who had a secret treaty with Abu Sufyan in order to attack the Muslims, he was assassinated by Muhammad ibn Maslama, right? And Banu Nadir at that time had already broken the treaty, and they had the chieftain killed as well by the Muslims, right? And during the Battle of Uhud, they also had the Quraysh with logistics, right? So they gave logistical support to the Quraysh during the Battle of Uhud, right? And then finally, there was a particular incident that took place after the Battle of Uhud, which was the Bir Mauna, right? In this particular incident in Bir Mauna, there were a lot of Muslims that were sent by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to Najd, right? So you had the western part of Arabia, which is called Hijaz, and then the central part of Arabia, which is called Najd. Okay. Then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sent a lot of Muslims, about 70 of the Muslims, very learned Muslims from the Sufa, from the 70 Al Sufa to the Najd area in order to teach them about Islam. Okay, so they had invited the Muslims to teach them about Islam. Okay, and then when they were going there, then they were ambushed and they were basically killed So all 70 of them were killed. Okay, they were martyred. Now there was one Muslim, when he heard about it, he thought that this one person who was there in front of him, he was also part of that, and he killed him, right? So he accidentally killed two of the other people, right? So he accidentally killed two people who were not the ones who were who were not the ones who were in the force who had killed the Muslims, right? So he accidentally mistook them for the ones who had killed the Muslims, and he killed them. Okay, so he killed two of them, right? So now Muhammad Sallam had already given the two of them who were killed. Muhammad Sallam had already given them the protection. Okay, so therefore now, since the Muslim had killed him by mistake, so Muhammad Sallam decided to repay them the blood money, right? So repay the family the blood money, the tribe the blood money. So the blood money, as you know, that was 200 camels. So for one person, 100 camels, two person were killed. So the blood money was 200 camels. Okay. So now the issue was for the entire Medina, for the safety of entire Medina, right? So now the blood money has to be paid according to the treaty that was there in place. The blood money has to be paid by the Muslims as well as the Jews, right? If an issue is there which concerns the people of Medina and also the Muslims, the entire Medina, the Jews and the Muslims, the entire people of Medina, then they have to contribute in paying the blood money, right? And they have to contribute monetarily in order to solve the issue. So when Muhammad went near the fortresses of Banu Nadheer, so therefore at that time, Banu Nadheer, they decided to throw a rock from the top of the fortress and basically kill Muhammad, right? And then Muhammad was informed by Jibrael that this is what they are going to do. So therefore Muhammad immediately went away from there. Okay, and then later he told the Sahabi that they were trying to kill me. Okay, and then of course Banu Nadheer, they had done a lot of other things. They had helped the Quraysh. They had already broken the treaty before, but Muhammad tolerated them. But this was the final nail in the coffin. They could not be tolerated anymore. So therefore Muhammad gave them 10 days to leave Medina. Okay, and then when they did not leave, then Muhammad besieged them like he did. He besieged Banu Qainuqa. So Muslims went there. They surrounded their fortresses, and Banu Nadheer, they were not giving up as easily as Banu Qainuqa. So therefore, what Muhammad did was he burned a few of their trees, right? And now when their orchards were getting burned, then Banu Nadheer, they finally surrendered. They capitulated. They surrendered. And Muhammad gave them a few days, 10 days to leave Medina, to pack their bags and to leave Medina. Okay. And this is what Banu Nadheer did. Within the given time, they took all of their possessions on the camels or horses or whatever they had, and they went outside Medina, right? So now Medina initially had, when the Muhammad came, they had three tribes: Banu Qainuqa, Banu Nadheer, and Banu Qurayza, right? Now Banu Nadheer and Banu Qainuqa are expelled from Medina, and Banu Qurayza is still there inside Medina. Okay, and then later there's going to be a skirmish there's going to be problems with Banu Qurayza as well, right? And we'll discuss it later, inshallah. Okay. So now this brings this session to an end. Any questions? Any questions? No questions? If not, then we can stop this. We can call it a day. Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. So end meeting, right?